Hey everyone, what I want to do today is just kind of go over some of the details that I'm going to be expecting you to do in class on Thursday. And so the goal here is to review, so reviewing big terms. Y'all been doing a lot of writing and you've been doing very well with that, but I want to make sure that you understand what you have to include in that writing. What I did here is similar to the same form you've seen before, skills that are required for the test next week. And you see a lot of describe, explain, and compare in here. What I want to make sure you understand is when you are writing on your AP test, you've got to make sure that you give more than a one-sentence response. Like I said the other day in class, on our Zoom call, you need to make sure if it asks you to describe something, you probably ought to include an example. If it asks you to explain, then you need to explain thoroughly and make sure you close the loop in your argument. Okay, you want a full circle. And reading the question carefully and making sure you understand what is being asked is very, very important. So here it says describe geographic concepts. So you need to be able to explain the differences in maps. You need to understand models and theories in geography. Explaining geographic concepts. So not only can you describe them, but can you explain? How do you apply it to population? How do you look at a chart and apply the information that you see in that chart? How do you use the information in the chart to explain why the total fertility rate has gone down in a particular country? Anytime you are comparing, it is like compare and contrast, so you do need to make sure that you are actually including both items in your argument or in your writing, and that you are addressing all aspects of the question. But my point here is making sure you understand how much they want you to explain. They want you to compare. They want you to describe. This is not going to be simple definition questions. Okay? So what I need you to do here is you're going to have to look at this unit. Each person has a particular unit assigned to them. But all of y'all have to write something in Unit 1. So for Unit 1, if it's Introduction of Maps, you might write something like cartography, right? Geographic data, you could come up with, add in like GIS or maybe remote sensing, something GPS, something that relates to the course, something we've studied, anything that you might be asked to apply on an FRQ in the test. So this is just making sure that you're reviewing each unit of material. But you need to make sure that I know that you've contributed something to Unit 1 so that you can get your credit. For Unit 2, what I need y'all to do is make sure you talk about all these different topics. Again, bulleted information is all I'm looking for. I'm looking for y'all to review and helping each other review. So this is kind of like our class time discussion, but we're just going to have to do it in through a Google document. Between your group members, you figure out who's doing 2.1 through 2.4, 2.5 through 2.8, 2.9 through 2.12. Try to write something down for everything. But for example, when it's talking about aging populations right here in 2.9, what I want you to do is I want you to be thinking about places like Japan. I want you to think about stage 5, of the demographic transition model. Malthusian theory, I want you to also be thinking about Boserup. Okay, so you need to be able to, if there's a theory in there, you need to be thinking about, if they ask me a question about Malthus, how am I going to address the question? Well, you're probably going to have to bring into Esther Boserup as well into your writing. So keeping those aspects in mind. I did go ahead and add in these two regional maps. It is one is the larger map, the big picture view, and then the other one is the world regions map. So, which is just, it's a closer look, you know, how it divides it up into the smaller areas. So a couple of very important things for you to remember is going to be population distribution, understanding how migration plays into that, understanding the demographic transition model, also dynamics, understanding about total fertility rate, natural increase rate, understanding how like a natural disaster may affect your population. And again, comes into here with migration. You're also going to have voluntary and involuntary migration. You also need to know about internally displaced people and then internally displaced persons. You also need to know about you know, refugees, what's an asylum seeker, you know, a refugee versus a migrant worker, etc., etc. So all of that is, that's a lot in there, but I just want to give you an idea of some things to jot down while you're writing. For culture and cultural landscapes, you must understand that this whole course is built on the cultural landscape and how humans have transformed the earth to meet their needs, okay? And understanding that the landscape of an area reflects the culture of the people who inhabit it. So that is a major portion of this class, and understanding that is key to understanding where people live, how they live, and why they live, okay? It's always the why of the where. Make sure you understand that too. Okay, historical causes of diffusion is something that we, you know, kind of brushed up on. Remember when I gave you a whole bunch of different dates to remember, whether it was Industrial Revolution, Agricultural Revolution, you know, maybe colonization, slavery, those dates, you may want to go through and brush up on them. It's not necessarily they're going to ask you what year something happened, but you may want to have that information with you just so that, you know, you can use it as a reference. So you may want to keep those dates information close at hand as well. Religion and language, you should also remember the connections between the religion and language, especially when it comes to Arabic. I have this map added on to the document as well. This is really useful, and it also gives you, you know, a review of the Sino-Tibetan languages versus Afro-Asiatic, the Niger, Congo, Uralic, and Indo-European. Remember that your Sino-Tibetan language family as well as the Indo-European are going to be your two largest. Okay, so keeping that in mind, that is a helpful little reference tool. It'll let you think about the connection between language and culture. It also helps you with diffusion, because understanding how people move from one place to another, if you see a language pop up in a new area, it lets you know that there was some type of diffusion, most likely relocation diffusion. Okay, let's see. Looking over political geography, you need to know the different types of maps. You need to know the different shapes and morphologies of countries. You need to know what's a political boundary, understanding that there are political boundaries within countries, also known as states, but then there are the political boundaries of to make something a country has to be internationally recognized. Okay, you need to go back again when I'm talking about the morphology, going through compact versus elongated versus perforated. Think about different types of boundaries too, the relic boundaries, for example, the German Wall. or something along the lines of, you know, antecedent boundary, which is basically something that happened before, or was like a landform that existed before people settled there. So think about those different types of things. We've kind of gone over some of the devolution information in some of the essays you've covered. Make sure you understand devolution does not lead to balkanization. It can, but it is not always end up in creating separate countries. Okay, sovereignty, challenges of sovereignty, you can think about something like China and how they have tried to exert control over areas. You can talk about the law of the sea and how China continues to make little islands to kind of expand their access to waters. Okay, centrifugal and centripetal forces, we've talked a lot about those. Y'all have written a lot about that and done a good job. All right, but just review that as well. Agriculture, making sure you understand agriculture, the different ways. A lot of people didn't know what ridge farming was. They confused it with terrace farming on one of the quizzes. So make sure you go over those different types of methods. Think about how traditional forms of agriculture have changed over the years, how mechanization, industrial revolution, as well as the green revolution have changed things. Spatial organization of agriculture, that is really important. Okay, think if you have that topic and you need to talk about it, you could think about how, like, in developing countries, agriculture is going to be practiced differently than in developing countries. You'll also think about how, you could think about how GMOs are available in some areas and not in others. So again, if you see something like the model, make sure you understand that you need to review the von Thunen model or any sorts of models, and be able to explain how well they do or do not apply. Okay, that's very, very important. And always make sure you understand the role of women in all these different aspects and all these different units. So that's basically the idea. I just want you to write I want you to include a bulleted information about each. Okay, and I'm sorry if the video skips, but what I want to just show you here is some of the things that I jotted down, just because to explain to you the thought process I want you to go through while you're working on your sections. And this is a great way for you to study, because if you think out loud and you study out loud, it'll help you whenever you're writing. Okay, so here for 5.9, what we have is the global system of agriculture. Okay, the most important thing here is global. Okay, and so you need to think about connections with agriculture across the globe, across the different countries, etc. And so these are just some of the things I expect for you to write. So you have TNCs, transnational corporations, and their influence with herbicides. I could have put any sort of seeds, you know, maybe fertilizers, etc. Or I could put pesticides, right? I could research at universities or other institutions that help eliminate famine, you know, across the globe. Think green revolution too. Then you could also bring into the argument soybeans and how soybeans, their shipment from the U.S. To China. We have a lot of soybean farmers in the U.S. And how were these U.S. farmers affected by the tariffs that were implemented in 2019? Okay, so that is definitely a global system of agriculture. How does global production affect our everyday life? So I put that as a question, but really you would say global production affects our everyday life because blah blah blah. So and then here, even with agriculture, you don't have to keep just to food. Think in mind, cotton is an agricultural product. It's grown. Where is it grown? How do we get the cotton to make our t-shirts? that's where I want you to go with this. That's kind of what I expect y'all to do in class. If you have any questions about this, let me know.